I'm trying to think of a way to summarize Dark, but I think it is beyond human ability to do so. It's just such a complex show that I just have to move on with the assumption that you have seen the first and second seasons when I'm talking about it, because it would just take forever to summarize everything that happened, and I would still probably miss something. But anyway, my name is Michael, and I'm here to talk about the German language Netflix science fiction series Dark, which recently released its second season a few weeks ago. And it's blown me away. Ever since I first saw it back in 2017, I think this is one of the best shows on Netflix. It is mysterious and scary and interesting, and the characters are very well written, and it has a kind of Twin Peaksian sort of feel here and there with a town with all of these dark secrets, and people are cheating on one another, and there's crime going on in the background, and there's some sort of mysterious force that's involving itself in everybody's lives. But anyway, I'm going to leave a link right here somewhere on the screen to the original video that I did back in 2017 on the first season of Dark. You might want to check that out before watching this one, but anyway, let's go. Season 2 of Dark has picked up where the first season left off, going into the future. It's almost impossible to talk about any one particular section of the show without unraveling everything into 100 other different strands. They actually say in the show that this is like sort of a knot, that life is just hundreds of knots all tied together, interconnected in various ways. And it's hard to know exactly where to begin talking about the show, because it not only has an ensemble cast of like 24 characters, it has each of those characters in multiple time frames in the 1920s, 50s, 80s, the 2010s, and the post-apocalyptic future. So there could be hundreds of characters, because a major theme of the show seems to be that you're not the same person you are. I mean, really, in real life, 5 to 10 years past, you were not the same person that you are today. You change every decade or so into a completely different human being. There may be some similar quirks of character and behavior that reflect your biology, for lack of a better term. This sort of who you are physically may stay the same. You may like a certain food or behave in a certain way, react emotionally in a certain way, but you just transform into an entirely different human being pretty much every 10 years or so. You need different things, want different things, and that's a good thing, because it allows you to grow and change and become a new, better, more interesting, more educated person. But it also carries with it a pretty dark risk, because the opposite could actually happen. You could devolve into someone who is a terrible, vile, emotionless, cold person over time, which I think is kind of a fear when you're a teenager, that when you get older, it's sort of like the I want to die before I get old mentality from The Who. You feel like you're going to become sort of a corrupted, bad person when you become an adult. There was a saying back in the hippie era that never trust anyone over 30. And I think that this show really takes an interesting look at that. The first season ended with a very brief glimpse of the hinge that the entire show turns on, the post-apocalyptic future. The town of Winden is going to be destroyed somehow in the year 2020. Now, the entire show revolves around two questions. One, how did this apocalypse occur? And two, can we stop that apocalypse from happening? Because obviously we don't want the entire world to be destroyed, unless you're Kefka from Final Fantasy VI or something. I mean, most people don't want that. Or you're in the Doom Guard in Planescape or something. So the main characters generally fall along two sides. Well, three sides, I guess. The first being the ignorant, who don't really know there are two sides. But the two sides that are fighting over this are a group of people that are trying to create the apocalypse, that are trying to allow it to continue happening, and a group of people that are trying to stop the apocalypse from happening and rewrite the course of history. In this ensemble cast, there is sort of a main character, and that's Jonas Kahnwald, the person that is the son of a man that went back in time when he was 12 years old and sort of grew up into being Jonas's father. And even though we spend a heck of a lot of time with other characters, Jonas is still sort of pretty much the main character, I would say. He seems to have a kind of pivot point that the rest of the show kind of turns on. And we start out by going into this post-apocalyptic future, and it looks amazing. This is probably my favorite visually part of the entire series, because it looks sort of like Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl. There are these huge abandoned buildings that look like they were like right next to Chernobyl. And everything is a ruined wasteland, and there are people that are wandering around with machine guns, and they seem to be part of the Sic Mundus cult, thus the world was created cult. And they seem to, they prevent people from going near the rift in time that is in Winden. And Jonas is sort of struggling to survive amongst this group of people, and it's just really cool to see them like wandering around in armored personnel carriers, shooting people, executing people. They execute a bunch of French people that wander into the camp for some reason, and it's actually it's just so dark and frightening. And the whole thing looks incredible. But Jonas eventually finds his way. I'm going to call him Jonas because it's Jonas with a Y in German, but Jonas just sounds easier for me as an English speaker. So Jonas eventually finds a way to go through what he calls the God particle, which is a physics term that I don't really have a strong understanding of, and that's after researching it, so I'm not really very good with science, so I'm sorry if you wanted something about the God particle, because supposedly it's something that creates all of the mass, or gives everything its mass in the universe, but I don't know why that would be involved in time travel anyway. He goes through a wormhole after wandering around in the future, and winds up back in the 1920s, and he discovers the sort of progenitor of the Sic Mundus cult that's sort of trying to bring about this apocalypse. And to his horror, he finds out that this person might be himself. This man calls himself Adam, and he says that he's Jonas just as an old man with a strange, sort of deformed, melted face from going through the wormhole over and over again across an entire lifetime. So this is the ultimate, die a hero or live long enough to become a villain right here. I mean, Jonas has found out that he is the main villain of the series that he's essentially been fighting against. And this brings up an interesting point here, because one kind of criticism I would have with the show is that there's two separate types of time travel story. There's a time travel story where you can change the past and alter the present, sort of like in Back to the Future, where you can prevent your parents from meeting one another and then you're not born. But there's also a type of science fiction time travel show where it's impossible to change the past, and anything you try to do to affect the past just helps what we already know to happen to continue happening. So no matter what you do, you're entirely impotent. You can't actually affect anything. And Dark seems to be the latter part of this. So characters tend not to sort of act on new information and try to affect things, but they just sort of react to everything that's going on around them and help a pre-existing story already come about. So you kind of question, well, what's the point of doing anything? If anything that you do is just going to result in the exact same thing happening and you can't affect anything in any way, then why are the characters doing anything? I mean, it's utterly pointless. But in a way, I think they're trying to suggest that the evil guy, Adam, believes that. He believes that there's no way to affect anything that you do, but in reality, there may be a way to change things. Another person, the person representing the light side, is Claudia Tiedemann. And we spend a heck of a lot of time with Claudia this time around, as she's the head of the nuclear power plant in the 1980s, and we get to see her discovering all of this good and evil, light and dark, apocalypse, non-apocalypse war that's going on, and her introduction to it, strangely enough, by Jonas, the person that, when she's an elderly person, introduces Jonas to it. So it's what they call the bootstrap paradox. Nobody really created anything. Jonas teaches Claudia so Claudia can get older and teach younger Jonas. So it's just this sort of Mobius strip of events that are going on all the time where no one is really the genesis point. And I think that term is really at the heart of the matter of the show, because Genesis, Sic Mundus creatus est, thus the world was created. The world as it's constituted in the show is that never-ending Mobius strip, a constant series of knots that are tied together like Ariadne's thread. Ariadne was a character in the myth about Theseus and the Minotaur in ancient Greece, and she creates the, I think, ball of yarn or something like that Theseus is able to tie around in the labyrinth in order to find his way out after he's chucked in there with the bull-headed human. And I think that's what they're trying to say, that life is just this constant interconnection of these chords leading maybe towards the center of a mystery. But what is at the center of a mystery? In the myth of the Minotaur, it's a monster, this horrible half-human creature. Is Adam the Minotaur the center of this mystery, or does the mystery go even deeper than that? So it's kind of hard to tell. And I say that Adam claims to be Jonas because he lies multiple times in this show. So it's hard to believe anything that he says. Maybe he is Jonas, but maybe he's just lying about it. I don't know. He's obviously so deformed, we can't really get a good look at him. He has the same scar around his neck that Jonas does. But that's really just about it. No, I guess it could be Jonas, I don't know. Now, back in Winden in the present, which is 2020 now, in the show, we get to see the rest of Jonas's friends trying to cope with everything that's happening. And this is another aspect of the show I have to, highlight. It's not just the plot that's really good in this show. Unlike, say, the Stranger Things, where the characters drive everything and the plot is just sort of like a bubblegum popcorn kind of flick most of the time, in this one, the plot is really good and the characters are great. They're mature, interesting, well-written characters that, in most circumstances, I think crucially react the way real people would react under these circumstances, rather than just sort of function as instruments of the writer's will. They feel like real people who say real things and behave in an honest way. And I just love spending time with all of these characters outside of the main time travel plot and seeing their various relationships, who's dating who's cheating on who's lying. So that aspect of the show is great as well. And as I said, it does have a Twin Peaksian kind of like everyone's cheating on everyone else or everyone's lying, everybody has a secret kind of feel to it that I really like. Marta, Jonas's erstwhile girlfriend, is trying to struggle through the loss not only of her boyfriend Jonas, but of her kid brother Mikkel and her father and her mother going sort of crazy. So she's having a really rough time with this, and only her older brother, that's really the only person that she can rely on. And they begin to sort of investigate this mystery. I don't know why they didn't do it immediately after the end of the first season, but whatever. They start to look into what's been happening, and they go to explore the caves, and they end up finding Bartosz, this character that I felt in the first season they were kind of setting up to be an evil guy, but weirdly enough, they didn't do a whole lot with that. I thought that they were going to set him up to maybe be Noah, or become Noah when he gets older, but that's not true. He's not Noah, and I don't, they kind of made him seem like, what exactly was he doing for Noah at the end of the first and between the first and second seasons? Did they ever really explain that? He seems to be going back in time for him for some reason, but they don't go into what he's actually doing, as far as I know. I don't remember that coming up. So they kind of almost waste this character in a way, because I thought they were setting him up to really be a villain, but he just ends up being kind of a pathetic character. So the kids discover that time travel exists. They go back in time and see the 1980s with Bartosz. And that's kind of an interesting part of the second season, that pretty much all of the main characters, bar one or two, know that time travel is real by the end. They know that it's real, they've seen the past for the most part, and they believe that time travel is a thing, so it kind of loses that mystery element of no one really knows exactly what's going on. Looking at Marta, I'm reminded of the fact that Voltaire, the famous Enlightenment philosopher, there's no easy way to say this, he was sleeping with his niece. And it's strange to think that because he's just this vitally important figure to European history. But this great man, this one of the greatest of all men of the 1700s, started a sexual relationship with his niece when she was 27 and he was, I think, in his 50s. So, yeah, that's really creepy and weird to think about. And the reason I bring that up, if you've seen the show, is, it's kind of obvious, is that Marta is technically Jonas's aunt. Because Mikkel, her brother, he went back in time and grew up and became Jonas's father, but they slept together before they knew that. So yeah, and their relationship actually reignites in this one. There's no, the guy's banging his aunt. There's no other way to say it, is there? That's kind of creepy. I kind of thought that they were going to distance themselves from one another, when they find out that they were, related. But I guess, I don't know, I don't know what they do in Germany. But anyway, That's I actually found myself kind of rooting for this story to come about. I don't know why, but I felt like they probably should be together, even if ooh, even if they're related, which is really, I know that's really weird to say, but anyway, now let's move on from that oddity. Another character that we get to see a lot more of this time that was set up is Elizabeth, the deaf girl who's the daughter of the police chief. We find out amazingly that she is one of the leaders, or sort of one of the enforcers for the Sic Mundus cult in the future, and apparently she's her own mother, I guess? Because we have Elizabeth here. Maybe I can try to draw a family tree of this if possible, but we have Elizabeth, who is the daughter of Charlotte, and she, oh God, and Elizabeth gets older, becomes an adult, and has a child with Noah, who is Charlotte. She gives birth to her own mother, and then her mother obviously meets Doppler, whatever his name is, the psychiatrist guy, and they have a child who is Elizabeth. So again, it's like this Mobius strip. It's this never-ending thread. It's the bootstrap paradox. Who, the mother and the daughter, they're both their mother and their daughter. It's bizarre. It really is kind of creepy. But anyway, another character that I have to mention is Hannah, who is Jonas's mother. And we already know from the first season that she is not a stable woman. There's something really wrong with Hannah. I don't know exactly what's wrong with her, but she just seems emotionally unwell. And in this season, she actually seems suicidal and just completely on edge. And again, has gone from sort of not villainous exactly, but sort of an unpleasant, creepy character with the things that she does in the first season, to sort of a pathetic character in the second season, where she's just constantly harassed and put upon by people that dislike her or are condemning her for various reasons, and she just becomes more and more miserable over time until she eventually decides to go into the past. She goes into the 1950s to try to save Ulrich, and when she gets there, she just sort of delights in taunting him and leaving him in the past. And it's just so scary and creepy that she could have saved him and could have got him out of there and brought him back to the present, but just leaves him there. It's really, really, she's a very screwed up character. There's something really wrong with her, and she seems to be staying in the past, and maybe is even going to start dating Inspector Egon Tiedemann. So I don't know exactly where, if they have any children, that would leave them in the chain of heredity, of this incestuous heredity that's going on in this tiny little town. But anyway, back to the main plot. Jonas is told by Adam that far from being a cult or a religious organization, Sic Mundus is actually an anti-religious organization in that they are trying to kill God. Well, what does that mean, to kill God? We're not talking about the Abrahamic God. We're talking about the concept of God, which they have identified essentially as causality. Time itself, they believe, is God. The cause and effect of standard interactions with space and time is to them God. So they're trying to destroy it, I guess, but what does that mean? What would that world look like if cause and effect no longer existed, if time itself no longer existed, if people did not age, if there was no change whatsoever from point A to point B? It would be the ultimate sort of static state where nothing, how could you exist without time? What would space be without time? It doesn't make any sense. In some ways, I think Adam might be lying to Jonas here, because, he lies to him, we know, by admission several times here in the second season. But Adam, I think in some ways, actually is trying to become God. That's what he wants to do. By destroying time or gaining mastery over time, he wants to become the God of this new world in the post-apocalypse, which almost reminds me a lot of JRPGs in some ways. This almost has a feeling of some of the Shin Megami Tensei games, like Nocturne, in a way, where someone is trying to destroy the Earth as it is constituted now in order to create a post-apocalyptic world where they can be some sort of deity. And I think there's some sort of weird connection there. But It's hard to know exactly what's happening because so many of the main characters, we don't know for certain what's going on because they are lying so much. By the end of season 2, we get another fascinating moment. Just like the end of season 1 ends with kind of a cliffhanger, sort of. Season 2 ends in an even greater cliffhanger because Adam and Jonas both travel back to the present of 2020 right before the apocalypse. And Adam shoots and kills Martha. But immediately after that, Martha appears behind Jonas with a different clothes and different haircut, and she says, "I'm not who you think I am." And she says, the question isn't what time I'm from, but what world. So we have our parallel dimensions being tossed into the dark universe again. I mean, I feel like that might be what's going on here, that there's now not just different people from different times in the same world, but different people from different times in potentially infinite parallel universes, which has made the show even more complicated. You know, the opening sequence is of a sort of mirrored image, and I really like this opening sequence. The song actually really grew on me, and I like it quite a bit. But this opening sequence where everything someone has done is sort of reflected next to it, it kind of reminds me that maybe there are parallel universes in this world. I didn't really think that was going to be the big twist at the end, but you know, it's kind of painful seeing all of this stuff because I desperately want to know what's going to happen next. Supposedly, there's only going to be one more season of Dark, just one concluding third season, and that's going to be it. And I don't know how they're going to conclude all of these strands. I mean, it seems impossible. I mean, the show designer, you know, they say in the show itself that life is just a series of knots and strands all tied together in various ways. So I don't know if they can even possibly do that, or what are they going to do? Are they going to reverse everything and stop Jonas's father from dying and stop everything from the beginning? Or is that even possible? Are they going to create some new world? Are they going to go to another parallel world? Are they people from the parallel world trying to stop the apocalypse in our world because the apocalypse with our God particle is somehow going to affect the other worlds? That's what I was thinking, that they have an interest in stopping the apocalypse here because they want to create a new world that is free of Adam and whatever he's trying to do, because as a god of this world, he could affect all of the other parallel worlds. It's odd to think what exactly Adam wants. I don't really know, because I can't trust him in anything that he does. But so many great character moments happen in this season, sort of like with Noah. There's kind of a reverse in a way between Jonas and Noah, because Jonas is the hero, but then we see that also later on he's the villain. In this one, we see Noah in season 1 was the horrendous villain who was murdering the kids and just being generally evil, but we find out in the second season he's not the progenitor, not the creator of the Sic Mundus cult. He is just sort of a lackey of Adam, and he actually realizes that he's being betrayed by Adam, and that the world that Adam is trying to create is not a paradise, not some sort of holy land where everyone will be free. And that Adam is using him, and he tries to kill Adam. But like with that determinism thing about the past, he tries to kill Adam, but mysteriously his gun misfires and he can't kill him. Which reminded me a heck of a lot of a Red Dwarf episode, where they hear their futures and then find themselves unable to affect their futures because they've heard it already from someone who can see the future. I think it was in the 8th season, and it was actually a really good episode. There's a couple of episodes of Red Dwarf where they go back in time that this kind of reminded me of. But anyway, Noah is Noah doesn't become a hero, but he actually tries to stop Adam in some way, and he realizes that he can't tell his young self about what is happening and tell him not to kill the kids and tell him not to engage in this horrible series of crimes where he murders the people in the future, because if he does that, he's not going to be in the position to try to kill Adam. But it doesn't work anyway because Adam lives. So that was actually a really interesting moment where this horrendous villain was actually shown. It actually reminded me a lot of Lost, where they would, you know, with each season they would try to say that, oh, the people that were the villains in the last one, guess what? They're not the villains in this one. There's someone even more evil. Also, we see Agnes, the woman from the 1950s, is apparently Noah's sister and is part of the Sic Mundus cult. And instead of working with Claudia, as she was originally supposed to do, she ends up working for Adam, as does Magnus and maybe Franziska. We know Magnus is working with Adam, but I don't know if Franziska is also with him. There's another woman there. I don't know if they name her. So there's so many great character moments. I can't even go through them all. We get to see Ulrich in the 1980s as he's been in an insane asylum for 30 years, and he's this old man. And this is some of the best old man makeup I've ever seen. And Ulrich actually escapes from the mental asylum in the 80s to try to find Mikkel, but Egon stops him, and he sees his kid. He just lives this really torturous, horrifying existence, when he's someone that really tried to go into the past and change things. So it's a horrifying circumstance for him. I know he attacked Helga Doppler in the 1950s, but I don't think he deserves this. This is just so horrifying to see him treated in this way. Claudia Tiedemann, the sort of leader of the kind of good side, so to speak, goes through a really rough experience this season. I was actually thinking in the first season that it's too simple, that she's the good guy and Noah is the bad guy. That was too straightforward, and that they were going to try to pull some sort of switcheroo on us, and it turns out that Claudia is actually the bad guy. But it seems in the second season that even though they're trying to sort of push that in a way that maybe she's not as good as she appears, that she's just using people like Adam is, I mean, maybe she is. It's hard to believe that she's not at least better than Adam and Noah, if not actually the quote-unquote good guy, In the first season, Jonas actually mentions that there was really no good and evil, that there's just sort of like varying shades of perspective about what people are doing. And Claudia in this one, we spend so much time with her in the 1980s, and we find out that at one point she actually attempts to stop her father dying, because she goes in the future and finds out that he's mysteriously killed, but unfortunately she ends up causing his death, and she causes it in a way because she doesn't call an ambulance after he's injured by her in order to protect what is going on in the caves and the sort of scientific advancement she thinks that she's going to get from that. And that just seems like a really heavy blow. She's really hurt by what's going on here, but she also ends up causing his death, so it's this weird gray area where she's not exactly good or bad, or she's just sort of better than the alternative, really, but what she does is really pretty nasty and kind of cold and heartless, sort of emotionless to her own father. But hopefully she believes she's going to find a way to change that in the future. But anyway, I've rambled on along about this. There's so many things to talk about with so many characters and plot threads and times. There's hundreds of separate... there's like 5 or 6 different iterations of each character, and there are like 24 characters, so there are hundreds of things going on here, so I can't talk about everything. Yeah, Dark is an amazing show. The characters are excellent. The actors are brilliant. The writing is stupendous, both in how the characters are portrayed and their personal lives, but also in the world and the main plot, which is very exciting and really makes me just want to... I'm obsessed with it. I actually watched the second season twice, and then went back to watch the first season yet again, because this Dark really is an example of why the binge-watching thing is not good, because I binge-watched it and realized that I really needed to take time to digest what happened after each episode and think about it before watching the next one like a standard TV show. This is an absolutely fantastic show with a magnificent story, great characters. Please tell me in the comments what you thought of this show, what your theories are about what is going on in Dark. I'm really interested in seeing what other people have to say about this, because I am kind of at a loss for knowing what to believe and what Adam really wants especially, and why there was that weird sort of darkness hovering around Marta's womb at one point in this story, suggesting that there's some weird connection going on, if maybe Jonas and Marta had a child, if something strange would have happened there. I don't know what all that was about. Tell me all of your favorite theories about Dark. I really want to know what you think about the show so I can figure out what's going on. And I'm going to link my review of Dark, the original one I did at the end of this video. Please subscribe to this channel if you want to see more videos like this, where I talk about movies, video games, and television shows that I really like. And Yeah, please like this video if you liked it. My name is Michael. I have no idea what's going on at the end of the show. It is really, really confusing. And, yeah, thank you very much and have a good night.
Hail the dead.